Today we'll have a quick rundown of nerve root anatomy. So what does this mean? There is a different nerve root pedicle match between the cervical spine and the lumbar spine. So what does that mean? So in the cervical spine, there's a mismatch of the nerve root respective to the pedicle. Why is this? Because we all know that there are 7 cervical vertebrae, but there are 8 cervical nerves. So obviously there's a mismatch. So here at C7, T1, this is where the match begins to become normal. So what does this mean? For the respective vertebrae, so C2 in the cervical spine, the C2 nerve root actually exits above the C2 vertebrae, or the pedicle, the respective pedicle, so C2 pedicle. Versus in the lumbar spine, the L2 nerve root actually exits underneath the respective pedicle. So the L2 nerve root exits underneath the L2 pedicle, because the spinal cord is coming down, and the nerve root actually divides between L1 and L2 off of the spinal cord, but then actually exits underneath the L2 vertebrae. So in the cervical spine, all the nerve roots exit above the respective pedicle. So C3 nerve root exits above. C7 nerve root exits above. So normally you would think T1 is going to go above T1, but because there are 8 cervical nerves, the C8 exits above T1, and now T1 is actually going to exit below T1, how it should, just like in the lumbar spine all the way down. So another important thing that is actually very important practically, because it can determine where a spine interventionist is going to place medication depending on where they think symptoms are occurring. So on an MRI, if you get a report saying there is a L2, L3, here's a disc, right-sided, this would be the right side, right-sided, so here's your disc. Disc herniation, there's a disc protruding out here. If you didn't know if that was extraforaminal or central, you actually would not know which nerve is being compressed, even though you would think between L2, L3, that the L2 nerve root, since it exits underneath L2, that this would be pushing on the L2 nerve. But what we haven't gone over is how they divide. So as the nerves are coming off the spinal cord, they leave. And so as we said earlier, the L2 nerve, it leaves actually between L1 and L2, descends, and then exits under L2. So that is why a central disc herniation here, hitting that L2 nerve root before it descends, could actually cause L2 symptoms. So a central L1, L2 disc herniation would actually cause symptoms of the L2 nerve root, versus a lateral L2, L3 disc herniation would actually hit the L2 nerve root as it is exiting the foramina. As you can see, a lateral disc herniation between L2, L3 would hit the L2 nerve root, versus a central one here would actually hit the L3 nerve root before it gets to descend and exit the L3, L4 foramina. So that is why knowing spine anatomy is very important, and it's a highly testable subject for PM&R boards. It's just very good general knowledge to know that, to be able to interpret MRI findings and making sure they match up with your patient's physical exam and symptom history.